Yes. So all right. So as you remember, we had developed the background for studying thin parallel film interference. And the first thing that we discussed was reversibility of light. Then we defined the reflection and transmission coefficients, and we saw that we require to know those definitions because we finally want to arrive at Stokes' law, which is very, very important in the case of thin film interference or interference by division of amplitude. So we saw how the amplitude of an incident beam is split up when it is falling on the surface of a or the interface of two media. And so we saw that if the original beam is of amplitude A, then part of it will be reflected and part of it will be transmitted. How much, what part will be reflected or what part will be transmitted is decided by the reflection and transmission coefficient, and the reflection and transmission coefficient are specific to the media that are concerned for a particular incident light ray. All right. And so we saw that if we now change the position of the source so that the reflected ray becomes the incident ray, then this is the picture. And if we make the transmitted ray the incident ray, then this is the picture. And then we saw that if the reflected ray and the transmitted ray are both simultaneously made the incident rays, then this is what we get. Okay, reflected ray partly reflected, partly transmitted, and this transmitted ray, which is the new incident ray, is also partly reflected, partly transmitted. All right. And then we saw that in order to maintain the principle of reversibility, that is, in order that this picture here is actually the opposite of this first picture here, we just need to change the direction of the arrows. That is what principle of reversibility of light says. And that gives us a relation between the transmission and reflection coefficients. And the first relation is this, T1, T2 equal to 1 minus R1 square. And the second relation is R1 equal to minus R2. So this is important, but this is the relation that will give us Stokes' law. So R1 equal to minus R2, it means that the negative sign is brought about by a phase change of pi. Whenever there is a phase change of pi, a phase change of 180 degree, the sign becomes opposite. So, and when there is a phase change of pi, it is associated with a path difference of lambda by 2, and this little bit of algebra shows why it is lambda by 2. So now we are, yes, hello? Okay, so now we are at a position to formally state Stokes' law, and this is the formal statement of Stokes' law. There is a phase change of pi and an additional path difference of lambda by 2 associated whenever there is a reflection backed by a denser medium. And this backed by a denser medium is an experimentally established fact which was got from the Lloyd single mirror experiment. Okay. And with this background, then we moved on to discuss interference in thin parallel films, where interference happens not by division of wavefronts but by division of amplitude. And I showed you some pictures, beautiful pictures which we get to see often in our daily lives, on the road, air bubbles. So this I claimed happened due to interference in thin parallel films, and that we will the fact that what I said is true will be established today. So this is what I meant by a thin parallel film: air above, air below, or a different medium below, and a particular medium of a refractive index mu is trapped between the boundaries. its thickness being T, and T, remember, is very, very small. Why T cannot be very large or very small? Why T has to be a optimal value, we will get to know today in today's class. So what happens is, when a ray is incident on such a film, it gets partially reflected and partially transmitted, but then this transmitted ray again gets reflected and transmitted, and this phenomenon, in this process of splitting up into reflected and transmitted rays goes on as the film continues. Okay. So there is multiple reflection and transmission, and we can easily write down the amplitudes of all the rays, because we now know how to write the amplitudes of rays. Before we studied, while we discussed Stokes' law, we got to know how the amplitude gets divided in terms of the reflection and transmission coefficients. And all the rays in the region above the film constitute the reflected mode, simply because the first ray in this region is a reflected ray, and all the rays in the region below the bottom boundary constitute the transmitted mode, because again the first ray in this region is a transmitted ray. Okay. So now we calculated the sum of the amplitudes of all the rays other than the first ray, and it came to be AR. So we said that the amplitude of the first reflected ray is AR, and the sum of the amplitudes of all the rest of the reflected rays is also AR. Okay, so obviously the first ray is the brightest. And then we questioned, who does this ray interfere with? It has to interfere with another ray. What ray? Which ray is that? And then we individually calculated the amplitudes of the rest of the rays, and we saw that the amplitude decreases drastically as R is a fraction. And finally, we decided that only the second ray, which has an amplitude AR, is somewhat close to the amplitude of the first reflected ray. So they fulfill the criteria to produce interference of good contrast. Remember, in order to see interference fringes properly, the intensities of the interfering rays must be equal or nearly equal. And in this case, we see that the amplitudes and therefore the intensities of only the first reflected ray and the second ray in the reflected mode are equal or nearly so. And so we finally could state that we are going to analyze the fringe pattern produced due to the interference of the first two rays in the reflected mode. Okay, so now we are at a position to do the mathematical analysis and the calculations related to thin parallel film interference. Okay, so this is the picture, the ray diagram that we are going to analyze mathematically. So you see, we have the incident ray, we have the thin parallel film, and since we will be calculating the interference only between the first two rays, because we saw that only those two rays fulfill the criteria of interfering producing proper fringes, so we have drawn only the first two rays in the reflected mode. And again, we can write down the amplitudes and show that the same is the case in the transmitted mode. So again, we have drawn only the first two rays in the transmitted mode. And of course, there is reflection within the film too. So we are now going to do this analysis. Okay. Now we have to remember that first and foremost, before beginning the algebra, that you see, as the ray AB gets reflected in the direction of this BN, there is a phase change of pi associated, and therefore there is an additional path difference of lambda by 2 incorporated. Why? Because here there is reflection backed by a denser medium. This is air over here and this is air down below. In between, the medium has refractive index greater than air, of course, so it is denser, and therefore we have to apply Stokes' law, because here we have reflection backed by a denser medium. So this is the first thing that we are going to remember before doing any calculation. Now, we have AB as the incident ray, BR1 as the first reflected ray, BC as the transmitted ray, and here DR2 is the second reflected ray. So as discussed, interference will take place between BR1 and DR2. Okay, I've tried to explain things as specifically as possible, going into minute details. So please, if you still have some questions, unmute your microphones and ask now, because it is better to get clarified. And as I keep repeating, I cannot see your faces, so I do not understand whether you are getting it or not. Okay, and it is very easy to, you know, keep the meeting on and do other things, but it is in your benefit that you concentrate and listen to whatever I'm saying, and ask questions. That is also very, very important. Okay, because this is a one-way sort of thing that is happening, that I'm going on talking and you are listening, but I would appreciate that you stop and ask questions if you need any clarifications. All right. Okay. So the next question, again, before going on to the mathematics, is that the two interfering rays, as you can see, are parallel. When we studied interference by division of wavefront, if you remember, then the rays were actually meeting on the screen at the point P, and we applied the principle of superposition at the point P on the screen to get the resultant intensities, right? But here we can clearly see that the rays that we claim will be interfering are actually parallel. And where do parallel rays meet? Parallel rays meet at infinity. So obviously, in order to interfere, they have to superpose on each other. And if they are meeting at infinity, so they are superposing at infinity. So are they interfering at infinity? Right? So that's the question that should come next to our mind, and that we should address before moving on further with this discussion. So how do we view the fringes? We cannot set up an observation observing apparatus at infinity, or we cannot ourselves go to infinity to see the fringes. So what do we do? Okay, any suggestions? How do we see the fringes?
Ma'am, we can
How?
use convex lens.
We use a lens. We can always converge parallel rays by using a convex lens, because parallel rays meet at the focal plane of a convex lens. Okay, so the observing instrument focuses the fringes on its focal plane. Remember, fringes can be formed only here. When you are observing thin film interference, whether you are observing the fringes with your naked eye or you are using an instrument, you have to adjust it until the rays are converged on the focal plane of the observing instrument, be it your eye or be it an apparatus. Anywhere else, you cannot see the fringes. They are formed only on the focal plane of the observing instrument. So this is very, very important. These fringes are localized fringes. Fringes formed due to thin parallel film interference are localized fringes. Very, very important. Okay. So now we are at a position to calculate the path difference. You know that in order to see where dark and bright fringes are formed, in order to analyze the fringe pattern, the first to calculate the path difference, we have to remember that when the first reflected ray starts its journey towards this direction, BR1, the other ray, that is the incident ray, splits up into the reflected and the transmitted rays. So the first ray starts its direction, its journey towards BR1. The other ray travels the distance BC and CD inside the medium before it can start its journey as the second reflected ray DR2. Okay, so once again I'll repeat myself what I'm trying to say. Please listen very carefully and try to understand. See, we are going to calculate the path difference between these two rays, BR1, DR2. They are parallel, so they do not meet until reaching infinity, but that problem we solved because we said that we will make them meet on the focal plane of some observing instrument. Okay, well done, good. Now you have to understand that BR1 and DR2 are not starting their journey from the points B and D at the same point of time. Okay, while the ray BR1 starts its journey in this direction from B, the other ray has to travel the distance BC plus CD within the medium. Then it reaches D and finally begins its journey in the direction of DR2. Clear to everybody? Now, how do we make two parallel rays equal? We drop a perpendicular from the end of one ray onto the other ray. So we have done exactly that. We drop a perpendicular from D onto BR1 at the point N. So DN is perpendicular to BR1. Now, as the first reflected ray travels the distance Bn, okay, as it goes, so since NR1 and DR2 are now same, as the ray starts from N, the other ray starts from D. But while the first ray goes from B to N, the other ray travels a distance BC plus CD, and since it is traveling this distance within the medium of refractive index mu, remember we have to replace its geometrical distance by the optical path, which is given by geometrical distance multiplied by refractive index. So, as the first ray covers a distance Bn, the second ray reaches D by traveling a distance mu into BC plus CD within the medium, and then they start their journey together from the points N and D together simultaneously. So, even before their simultaneous journey begins, a path difference is incorporated between the interfering rays. Now, what is this path difference? This path difference is therefore BC plus CD into mu minus Bn. As the second ray covers a distance BC plus CD into mu, the first ray travels a distance Bn, and this is the difference in the paths traveled by them before they start their journeys together as the interfering rays from N and D respectively. Is this portion clear to everybody? It is only then that I can move on, because the rest of it is very, very trivial trigonometrical calculation. Now, why the path difference is what I have written? Is it clear to everybody, or would you want me to repeat it slowly once more? Anyone wants me to repeat it once more? Yes? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes. Do you
Ma'am, you
want
can
me to repeat?
continue.
I can
No, ma'am.
continue. All right. Okay. So this is the path difference. As I keep repeating myself in every class, if when you go through the notes at home, go through the class, the recorded version at home, I mean after this, any juncture you find any question, any doubt, please feel free to send me the question through WhatsApp, or you can call me also, no problem. Okay. All right. So now we are going to calculate delta. That's our job. Now we are simply going to apply some trigonometry. We take a look at triangle BCM over here. Okay, triangle BCM, everybody can see it's a right angle triangle, and MC by BC is also equal to T by BC, because MC is basically the thickness of the film, and it is equal to cos R, where R is of course the angle of refraction. And so BC is basically equal to T by cos R, and BC is again equal to CD, so BC equal to CD equal to T by cos R. Therefore, this expression here, mu into BC by CD, is basically equal to 2 mu into T by cos R, 2 mu T by cos R. Okay. Then we take a look at the triangle BND, triangle BND over here. All right. So again, the ratio BN by BD, BN by BD is cos of this angle, cos of the angle NBD, which is cos of 90 minus I, which is nothing but sin I. So BN is equal to BD sin I. So we required BC plus CD into mu, and we required BN. BC plus CD into mu is 2 mu T by cos R. BN is BD sin I. So now we need to know the value of BD over here, where I is the angle of incidence. So what is the value of BD? Again, take into consideration triangle BCM. Okay, in triangle BCM, now take the ratio BM by BC. Now BM is again BD by 2, since M is the midpoint of BD. So BD by 2 BC is sin R. So BD is equal to 2 BC sin R. Okay. So BC, which we had already got as T by cos R. So BD is, you replace BC by T by cos R. So BD is 2T by cos R into sin R. So 2T tan R. So BN, which is equal to BD sin I, you replace BD by this 2T tan R. So BN is 2T tan R into sin I. Now if you take Snell's law now, Snell's law tells us sin I by sin R equal to mu. So sin I is equal to mu sin R. So 2T tan R equal to, so this Bn is equal to 2T tan R into mu sin R. And so this is 2 mu T sin square R by cos R. Okay. So now we can finally put these values in terms of mu, T and R in the expression of delta, and we get it to be mu 2T by cos R minus again mu 2T sin square R by cos R. So this is very simple, 2 mu T cos square R by cos R, because sin square R is 1 minus cos square R. And we now finally get the expression of the path difference as 2 mu T cos R. Okay, so the expression of the path difference is obtained in terms of constants: the refractive index of the medium, the thickness T of the parallel film, and R of course is the angle of refraction, which will depend on the angle of incidence. So for a given incident ray, everything is constant and we get a value of delta. Okay. Now, at this point, we have to recall Stokes' law, because at the beginning of this discussion, remember I told you that we have to remember that the first reflected ray is reflected back by a denser medium, and therefore in the very beginning, phase difference of pi is incorporated. So here reflection takes place backed by a denser medium. Therefore, there is associated an additional phase change of pi and therefore an additional path difference of lambda by 2. So we had calculated the path difference to be delta equal to 2 mu t cos r, that is the calculated path difference, geometrically calculated, which is now to be replaced by 2 mu t cos r plus or minus lambda by 2. We said an additional phase change, so there may be a phase change in the positive or the negative direction. It may be 180 degree ahead, it may be 180 degree behind, and therefore lambda by 2 may be positive or negative. So we have to take into consideration both the cases, and we write the final path difference between the interfering rays is 2 mu t cos r plus or minus lambda by 2. So now that we know the expression of path difference, we are very comfortable in finding the condition of brightness and darkness, because we know that for brightness the path difference should be integral multiples of the wavelength. So delta equal to n lambda. So you put the expression of delta 2 mu t cos r plus minus lambda by 2 equal to n lambda. So that 2 mu t cos r equal to n lambda, plus minus goes that side, it becomes minus plus lambda by 2. And so finally condition of brightness is given by 2 mu t cos r equal to 2n minus plus 1 lambda by 2, where of course n is any integer. And again we know the condition of darkness is 2n path difference equal to 2n plus 1 lambda by 2, odd multiple of lambda by 2. So again we put the expression of delta, and finally we get the condition of darkness is 2 mu t cos r equal to n lambda, where n is again an integer. So you quickly get the conditions of brightness and darkness. You can see that when the interfering rays are such that this expression here 2 mu t cos r is 2n minus plus 1 lambda by 2, n will give you the order of the fringe. You will get a bright fringe, and when this expression is simply an integral multiple of lambda, then you get a dark fringe. N will give you the order of the bright or the dark fringes. Okay, so now once again we take recourse to that same picture, the same diagram, and we now want to calculate the path difference in the transmitted mode. As I told you that there is air above and there is air below, so you can view the film from above or from below. If you are viewing the film from above, we say that we are viewing it in the reflected mode, and we see the fringes, and we saw what in the reflected mode are the conditions of brightness and darkness. In the same manner, we can view the film from below, and we can again see the fringes, and again we will have the conditions of brightness and darkness. So here the interfering rays are CT1 and ET2, CT1 and ET2. Once again, you can write down their amplitudes and do the calculations as we did for the reflected mode rays, and you can come to the conclusion that the interfering rays will be the first two rays, because they are the ones which have amplitudes close to each other, and therefore intensities which are equal or nearly equal. Now in this case, now as the ray CT1 starts its journey from C towards T1, the other ray travels the path CD plus DE within the film and then begins its journey towards ET2, the second transmitted ray. All right. So while this ray reaches from C to K, the other ray travels CD, D and reaches E. So once again, by the time the interfering rays start from K and E simultaneously, before that a path difference is incorporated between them, because while the first transmitted ray traverses a distance Ck, the other transmitted ray has to travel through a distance CD plus DE within the medium before it starts its journey as the second interfering ray in the direction of ET2. So we drop a perpendicular from E on CT1 at the point K, and the path difference therefore in the transmitted case is again optical path mu into CD plus DE minus CK. Same argument as before. And it can be easily shown that the path difference in case of transmitted rays is 2 mu t cos r. And that is your homework. You have to apply the trigonometry same manner as we did the reflected ray. Just you have to use different triangles. I know it will be very easy for you to calculate this. You will find that the result again is 2 mu t cos r, but that is your homework, and for the exam you can get either mode. So there's no point in practicing only the reflected mode and leaving aside the transmitted mode. So please do this working out. That's your assignment. All right. So we have the path difference in the transmitted mode, but we have to remember that in this case there is no reflection backed by a denser medium. None of the interfering rays are reflected at any point backed by a denser medium. See the first ray, CT1. It comes as AB, gets transmitted as BC, and then gets transmitted as CT1. The second ray comes as AB, transmitted at BC. There is a reflection here from C to D, but it is backed by a rarer medium. There's air over here. Again, there is a reflection at D as it goes to DE, but again the reflection is backed by a rarer medium as there is air here. And then it goes in the direction of ET2. So these two rays do not suffer reflection backed by a denser medium at any point, so we do not need to apply Stokes' law. There is no additional phase or path difference in the case of the rays in the transmitted mode. So therefore, the condition of brightness delta equal to n lambda is simply 2 mu t cos r equal to n lambda, where n are integers, and the condition of darkness is delta equal to 2n plus 1 lambda by 2. So 2 mu t cos r equal to 2n plus 1 lambda by 2, n equal to 0, 1, 2 integers. Simpler in the case of transmitted rays. All right. So now we will compare the conditions of maxima and minima for the reflected and the transmitted modes. See, I've just drawn a table so that you can see at one glance what the conditions of maxima and minima are in the case of reflected and transmitted modes. We know that the condition of maxima in the case of reflected mode is 2 mu t cos r equal to 2n minus plus 1 lambda by 2. And the condition of minima in case of transmitted mode is 2 mu t cos r equal to 2n plus 1 lambda by 2. So the condition of maxima in the reflected mode is the condition of minima in the transmitted mode. On the other hand, the condition of minima in the reflected mode is 2 mu t cos r equal to n lambda, whereas the condition of maxima 2 mu t cos r equal to n lambda is for the transmitted mode. So we can see clearly from this table that the condition of maxima for reflected mode is the condition of minima in the transmitted mode and vice versa. So we can clearly say by just looking at the mathematical expressions for the conditions of minima and maxima that the bright fringes in the reflected mode will be the dark fringes in the transmitted mode and vice versa. So the reflected and transmitted rays are complementary to each other. This again is a very important question that is often asked not only in your theory but also in your practical viva. Okay, that why are the reflected and transmitted rays called complementary, or what is the relation between the reflected and transmitted rays in the case of thin parallel film interference. And this is the condition, they are complementary to each other. Okay, all right. So now we have to make some very important discussions related to thin parallel film interference. And more important than the mathematical analysis itself, you saw that the mathematical analysis is not very involved, very trivial trigonometry and just some important concepts required in order to apply and finally get the expressions for brightness and darkness. But the discussions related are very important, and please listen to them very carefully and go through them very carefully. Okay. Okay. First thing, we discussed this earlier once again, so you can understand the importance. The interfering rays are parallel, so they meet only at infinity, and as suggested by you, we require a lens or a converging optical system which can converge the rays to meet virtually on the focal plane. So the fringes can be observed only on the focal plane of the optical system, and for this reason these fringes are called localized fringes. So why are fringes in thin parallel film interference called localized fringes? Because the interfering rays are parallel and they can be made to superpose on each other, thus producing fringes only on the focal plane of the observing system and nowhere else. So fringes are formed only on the focal plane of the observing system and nowhere else. Therefore, they are called localized fringes. This is in contrast to, alternatively, in division of wavefront, we saw that fringes are formed on the screen provided the screen is placed somewhere on the right hand side of the slit plane. Only depending on the value of capital D, the distance between the screen and the slit plane, the quality and quantity of the fringe width, etc., that will vary. But fringes will be formed. Therefore, these are called non-localized fringes. So how are the fringes of division of amplitude different to that produced by division of wavefront? One are localized fringes and the other are non-localized fringes. Just for your reference, I have given this picture once more for wavefront division. See the screen, these are the slits and the rays meet at a point P, division of wavefront taking place, and the position of this screen can be anywhere. It can be close, it can be far away. Further it is, the analysis will be more relevant and the fringes will be better to observe properly. But theoretically, the screen can be placed anywhere on the right hand side of the slits in order for the waves, the divided wavefronts to interfere, to superpose and produce the fringes. Therefore, they are non-localized fringes. All right, first point of discussion. Second, You see the expression of the path difference is 2 mu t cos r. Delta is 2 mu t cos r. In case of the reflected mode, you add or subtract from this expression lambda by 2 in order to do the calculations for bright and dark fringes, and in transmitted mode you keep this as it is. But this is the expression for the path difference. So for a given setup, mu and t are constants. You use a particular thin film, so the refractive index is a constant and the thickness of the parallel film is constant. That is why we call it a parallel film. So what is the only varying term? The only varying term is cosine r. So the only varying parameter is r, the angle of refraction. And what does it depend on? It depends on the angle of incidence. So the value of cos r will vary according to the variation of the incident angle. Therefore, a particular fringe, whether bright or dark, will form for a given angle of incidence. The condition of brightness or darkness is delta equal to n lambda or delta equal to 2n plus minus 1 lambda by 2, whether for reflected or for transmitted mode. It's just opposite for the two cases. So but that is the condition of brightness or darkness. So for a particular delta, the only thing that will vary to decide whether the fringe is bright or dark is depending only on the angle of incidence. So a fringe will form for a given angle of incidence. Therefore, these fringes are called fringes of equal inclination. A given fringe for a given inclination of the incident ray. Therefore, these are called fringes of equal inclination. Again, a very, very important concept. Remember, in Young's double slit experiment, we got fringes that are all of the same width. Okay, but here it is not the case, first of all. And secondly, a particular fringe is formed for a particular angle of inclination of the incident ray. We are not dealing with a single ray. We will, it's a sort of band of rays that are coming in, and so for a given ray we get a given inclination and that produces a particular fringe. We must remember that such localized fringes which are also of equal inclination are called Heidinger fringes. This is another important question. What are Heidinger fringes? Heidinger fringes are fringes formed are localized fringes which are formed due to the equal inclination of the incident ray. Now, I've just sort of tried to show you, because this is much easier to show in class, using my hands and gestures, but I've tried to show you with the help of a sort of 3D figure what is meant by fringes of equal inclination. See, this is the thin parallel film, okay? A boundary on top and the boundary below. In between is the film of thickness T and refractive index mu trapped between the two parallel boundaries. And so we have, say, one incident ray, so that the incident angle is I. Therefore, it will produce a reflected ray with angle r and a transmitted ray with angle r prime. I have not drawn the transmitted ray to avoid complexity of the diagram. But then we can have another incident ray. If you picture this in the three-dimensional mode, try to visualize it. We can have another ray with the same angle of incidence I, which will produce another ray in reflected ray with the same angle of reflection r and the same another transmitted ray with the same angle of transmission r prime, this orange set, okay? And we can have another ray again inclined at an angle I with the normal, which will produce the same set of reflected and transmitted rays with the same angles of reflection and transmission, and another ray like this. So see, the first set black, the second set orange, the third set blue, and the fourth set green are basically all rays that are incident with the same inclination I. So what is the shape that such rays, what is the locus of the end of such rays that are all inclined at an angle I to the normal? Can someone tell me? What will be the shape generated? It's a circle.
A cone.
It's a cone. The shape is the edge is a cone, but the shape of the formed by the ends of the rays is a circle. Okay, so the locus of the incident rays inclined at the same angle to the normal is a circle, and therefore Heidinger fringes or fringes of equal inclination are circular in shape. So in thin parallel films, we get to see circular fringes. Okay, I don't know how much I have succeeded in sort of drawing this figure. I'm not very good at drawing on the computer, but I've tried, and I hope I have been able to put through something to you so that you could understand why a circular fringe is produced by a set of incident rays inclined at the same angle, and why such fringes are called fringes of equal inclination. A particular inclination will produce one such circle. Another ray with a different inclination will produce another circle. Another ray with an even different inclination will produce another circle. So these are the incident rays, but you see when they undergo transmission and then reflection, they will meet to produce the final fringes, and I have not drawn those rays because I did not want to make the picture complex, but you can understand why a given inclination will produce a particular fringe, and so on. Okay. Now the next point of discussion is the effect of composite light. So long we have been discussing what will happen when the incident light is monochromatic. Okay, now let's see what will happen if the incident light is not monochromatic, if it is composite or polychromatic light. Now we know that the conditions of dark or bright fringe formation, whether in the reflected or in the transmitted mode, are given by these two equations. 2 mu t cos r equal to n lambda, or 2 mu t cos r equal to 2n plus 1 lambda by 2. Okay, complementary in the two cases, but these are the two expressions. So we see that they include the wavelength of the incident light. Now this doesn't pose a problem when the incident light is monochromatic, because then lambda has a single value, but if it is polychromatic, then the condition of brightness or darkness will be satisfied by a particular lambda at one point of time. So if the incident light is composite, it is clear that the fringes will be colored, because the condition of brightness and darkness are satisfied by the lambdas differently. Different lambdas will satisfy these conditions in different manners, one bright or the other dark, and so on and so forth. So there will be a separation of colors and the fringes will be colored. But of course, there will also be overlapping of the different orders for the different wavelengths. And now my claim that such fringes are formed due to interference by thin parallel films. Once again, I give you the pictures with which I began the discussion of this module. And as you can see, the circular fringes are formed. The fringes are circular in shape. Okay, so how is the thin film? What is the thin film over here? There is oil, above there is air, and in this case below there is water. In the case of an air bubble, the soap is the film and there is air on both sides. So that is how the film is formed of a different refractive index, and this is exactly what we have discussed till now. Thin parallel films exactly what is happening. Only here the incident light is composite, because on the oil film it is either sunlight falling or car headlights falling, which are all composite light, and same is the case of air bubble. So the next time you go out after the lockdown is over and you see an air bubble or a oil film on the road after a shower of rain, remember what ma'am had taught you over Skype, thin film interference. Okay, so you see and you jhat se remember, okay, this is thin film interference. All right. Now, what will happen if the film is not thin, if the film is very thick? Why do we not always see such coloring effect on the roads and in our houses? If it is due to thin film interference, there are such films all around. There are water films and different kinds of films. So why do we not always see this kind of pattern? It is because thick films will not produce such pattern. Why? See, for a thick film at a particular position, the condition of brightness may be simultaneously satisfied by a number of wavelengths. So there will be a merging of the colors, and merging of the colors will once again render the film colorless. So even if there is interference and separation and bright fringe and dark fringe occurring, because the film is very thick, there is a merging of the fringes for the different colors, and since the film is very thick, these colors merge too often at several places, and finally what we see is a colorless film, like as it was before, nothing special happening due to interference. Okay, next we will see why it is necessary to have a broad source in order to observe thin film interference. You cannot observe thin film interference with a point source. You see, I have tried to show what will happen if you have a point source. We have a single point source, and see, the thin film is illuminated by the point source, so the rays that are entering the eye has a very narrow range of direction. The other rays simply go outside our field of view. So how can you observe the different fringes? Okay, a single ray will produce one fringe, but you cannot see the pattern. Whereas if you have a broad source like this, see here the source is like this, S1 and S2. What happens is exactly what I have shown in this picture. The rays are incident at different angles from the different points of the source, and the reflected rays therefore are accommodated by the eye, and the field of view becomes very large. So in order to observe fringe patterns in a thin film interference, we need a broad source of light. With a single point source, things will happen, but we won't be able to see it with our eyes. And as I told you in the very beginning of our optics class through this online session, that in optics, everything depends on observations. Things might happen and we won't know if we cannot observe them. So observation is the key word in science, not only in optics, everywhere, because we have to see in order for it to be comprehended. All right. Okay. And finally, the final point of discussion regarding the thin film is what will happen if the film is extremely thin. We are talking of thin film, but how thin? We saw that nothing will happen in a thick film. We saw things will happen in a thin film, but how thin? What will happen if the film is extremely thin? Thin as in, see, we saw that the condition of brightness is this in the reflected mode, 2 mu t cos r equal to 2n minus plus 1 lambda by 2, and the path difference is this, delta equal to 2 mu t cos r plus minus lambda by 2. So if the film is so thin that it is even lesser than the value of the wavelength of the incoming light, how does that happen? Does that happen? Yes, that happens. There is a complete different branch of physics called thin films and surface phenomena, where people deal with films which are of the order of nanometers, less than the wavelength of visual light, visible light. Okay, so if you are trying to observe, since so many things have been studied regarding thin film, if you now go to one such lab and try to see what happens in a film which is thinner than the wavelength of the incident light, then what will you see? See, if t, the thickness, is much less than lambda, then in this expression you have to keep only lambda by 2. This can be neglected with respect to lambda by 2 since t is much less than lambda. So the path difference is now equal to lambda by 2. But what does a path difference of lambda by 2 mean? It means a phase difference of pi. And what does a phase difference of pi mean? It means the two interfering rays will be totally out of phase. Path difference between the interfering rays being lambda by 2 indicates that the phase difference between these interfering rays is pi. And if two interfering rays are totally out of phase, then there will only be destructive interference. So the film will appear uniformly dark. So if it is a very thin film, how thin? Value of thickness even lesser than the incident wavelength, then you cannot observe interference. The film will appear uniformly dark. Of course, if you observe it in the transmitted mode, the film will appear uniformly bright. Whatever be the case, you cannot observe interference. All right. So I think we'll stop here, because after this comes wedge-shaped films, and that is again a very involved, totally different discussion, and the result of wedge-shaped films will be used in Newton's rings. So in our next class, we will do wedge-shaped films and Newton's rings together. Is that all right? Okay, so I'm stopping here. And as I told you, you please send me the number of people present, and like you do in every class. And once again, whatever questions, please feel free to ask me, feel free to send. If you are solving sample papers obtained from university website or anywhere and you get stuck anywhere, then also you can send me those questions. I can try to solve them for you if you find any questions. And I think now we are at a position to do some problems. So I'll try and send you a problem sheet, an assignment. It will be uploaded in the LMS, as well as I'll send it to you via email, and we'll discuss if you are able to do those problems, and even if you are not able to do some of them, we can discuss that in our next class. Okay, one more information for you is that we have been told that we have to finish the notes that we are uploading in LMS. The syllabus has to be completed by 15th of May. Now you can understand that it is not possible to finish the syllabus, the theory syllabus, by 15th of May, because we need one more class for interference, but we need at least, I think, 3 classes more for diffraction, and then there are interferometers. So I do not see any scope of finishing the syllabus for another minimum 4 classes, okay, at the pace that we are doing. So but since the instruction is that we have to upload notes finishing the syllabus by 15th. I may upload the notes in the LMS, but if you are interested in doing the classes, I will continue doing the classes once a week like we are doing now, even after 15th May. Okay, so so it is up to you. I am ready to keep taking the classes using these PowerPoint presentations. So so I'm ready to continue even after 15th May. All right, so that's an information I wanted to convey to you. If that is all right with you, then we will continue in this manner. Meanwhile, next week we will have the class, and I'll upload whatever material I have in the LMS for you to see. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So please send in the attendance, and so we'll meet again next Friday. All right? Okay. And anyone who missed today's class can always see the recording. And if someone has recorded, you can share it in the group mail or in whatever way possible. And you can check from there what has been done in today's class. All right then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, ma'am.